and welcome to Fat Squirrel Speaks. Today is Tuesday, May 14th. I'm Amy Beth, also known as The Fat Squirrel on Ravelry and The Fat SQRRL on Instagram. Hello. Thanks for coming over on this very rainy, dreary afternoon. Lots of ambient traffic noise. Take what you will from that. I'm trying not to apologize for reality. The fact that I have to stop myself from apologizing for just the state of the place in which I'm existing is not lost on me. Oh my goodness. So this week's episode will have shameless self-promotion. It'll have some knitting. It will have some cross-stitch. And it will have some shenanigans. And it will have some book talk-ish things. So let's just get into it, okay? Shameless self-promotion. In the shop, fatsquirrelfibers.com. Last time we talked about these super cutie guys. There's still a few of this and then the Aran size. So the other one is like a cream background and the squirrel is, the owl has black and red accents. Super cute, right? So there's some of those still in the shop. And then as of May 15th at 9 p.m. Eastern, I'll have 2 more styles in the shop. I'm very excited about that. So this print, which is designed by Phoebe Wall, which I love so much. You might have a lady gnome or you might have a gentleman gnome whom you can see the bottom of right here. You probably won't get both, but you will definitely have one or the other. So if you have a preference, let me know and I will try to accommodate you. But you'll, how cute is that? And this color combination is so fun. It's like this sort of very light skyish blue background. Sky blue is probably too purpley sounding, but there's like very light, slightly warmer blue background. And then like this fun green coral combo. I've done this fabric before, but I loved it so much. Doing it again. And then I have these guys. So I'm sorry, that's a large wedge size. And then this size is the sweater size. So these super cute David the Gnomey kind of gnomes just out cavorting. And I just enjoy them so much. So yeah, those are going to be in the shop May 15th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, fatsquirrelfibers.com. The owls are there now. And then I'm excited. I'm going to go to Shaker Village in Kentucky. So it's not Shaker Village, is it? Shaker Village, Pleasant Hill, whatever. So I'm excited about that. So I'm like trying to get everything in order in my brain. So I'm just going to come back to you and we are going to visit together. I'm just going to let those other thoughts escape. I'm just going to catch and release. I'm just going to let those thought trout swim on and you and I are going to be together. See if you see moments of me just being like, that's what's happening. Oh my goodness. So that's the shameless self-promotion. Let's just get, shenanigans. Shenanigans. So not tons of shenanigans, but I did get a chance to one of our local parks, Eagle Creek, which is like a really big city park up on the northwest side of Indianapolis. They have a reservoir and they have some really great natural programs. Last weekend they did their Bird Fest. Lots of Indiana parks do them around this time of year. Like I think Indiana Dunes is next weekend. I didn't find out about theirs until like today, basically. I totally want to go to theirs. There's like a 4-day event. It's like jam-packed. You can buy tickets for like the whole weekend, like a festival. Like, and there's like guided tours where you actually are like hopping on buses and stuff. Anyway, it looks very charming. But I went to ours. I went to just one hike at ours. The teen is home from college and they were super gracious and went with me. So I did not feel like I could make them do an entire day of birding, or even, quite frankly, an entire morning of birding, because but it was so enjoyable. So specifically the walk I went on was the warbler walk, because right now I'm in central Indiana. We are experiencing like the warbler migration, so all different sorts of species that are not here for very long. They're just on their way to somewhere else, usually Canada, further north. But we get to see them for a little while, and it's really exciting. And so the hike that I went on was a volunteer who's not a park naturalist. And let me just discuss my nosy Nancy-ness. So hard not to engage. Like, but I am so interested in this young man. I don't know how old he is. I'm now 45, so I think everybody is 12. I don't know how that happens, but it does. But he was a younger man, and of course, I expect people who are leading hikes and things like that to be knowledgeable. No question, right? But I was blown away with his ability to differentiate different birdsong. Again, especially these warblers that are only here for, I don't know, like a month-ish. And he was able to just like differentiate them. I think there was like, there had to be at least 10 different warblers that he heard on our hike. We didn't get to see all of them, but he was able to identify their calls. And like by just like this small, not as an untrained person, I was just like, witchcraft? Do you know what I mean? Like, what is this knowledge that you possess? It must clearly be supernatural, because I don't have it. But it was fascinating. Like, and so and not only could he really differentiate the calls, but he also could tell very much like where they were spatially coming from. And so I was just like blown away. I've always wanted to be a person who could identify birds by call. And despite like having wonderful resources like the Merlin Bird ID, which we talked a little bit about last time, and like the whole of the internets to listen to calls, I've either just not been dedicated enough, or I've not gone about trying to learn them in a way that works for me. But it definitely, going on this hike, I was thoroughly impressed. So it was really fun. We got to see we got to see the Blackburnian warbler. And by the way, the warblers are so tiny. Like, that's the other thing. It's really great to be able to go with a birder who can not only like identify their calls, but can identify the bird itself from just like the smallest amount of it showing, like in the foliage and what have you. Like, it was really impressive. Now, the Blackburnian has like a very bright bright orange throat, so it's comparatively easy to identify, but then I looked at this little fella who's like, he was only this big when I saw him because he was in a tree far away. I know he's not only this big, but let's just say that he's this big. They migrate all the way from South America. This little tiny bird is flying all night. Why does nature do that to them? Because you know what I mean? Like, it makes sense in my head to be like, okay, like the bird goes from Florida to Canada or something. Like, right? Like maybe it's following its food source or something like that, like as the temperature changes throughout the year. But to go from South America all the way to Canada just feels like bananas, right? Like, this little tiny bird. It's not like it, I don't know, I need to find out more, but I was just thoroughly like, what the what? So I did sign up. I'm the worst. Last time I told you about like how I was like, I need to learn about baskets, So I did sign up though for the Cornell, so the people who make the Merlin Bird ID and things like that, the Cornell lab, I don't know. But they do have a few online courses you can take, and I've always been like, no, I don't need to take those courses. Like, I can, again, this information exists, like, right? It's like, it's everywhere. I could access it all the time, but apparently I I'm hoping that this structure will give me the option, like the style of learning that I need. So I'm hoping. I took the one, they have lots of different ones. They have like a big raptor ID one, which I'm also intrigued by. They have an owl ID one. They have, like, if you're in the Northeast, which I'm not, we share a lot, but they have like a big, like a very broad ranging course for Northeast bird identification. But I'm going to try the bird song one. I'm hoping it will click in my little brain. I think in general, I have trouble with sound memory. For example, I have a lot of trouble remembering pronunciations, even like when I'm like, even if I'm just having to store them in short term, like if we're talking and I know that there's something I don't know how to pronounce, and I will try to go back or try to do the pronunciation in my, like, remember, and then I'll talk to you and it will just be gone. So either I don't have good techniques for remembering sound, or or it's not something I'm good at. I don't know. We'll see. Have you taken any of their classes? Have you enjoyed them? Oh, the other thing I did, which I'm so glad I thought to do. Another reason I've been very hesitant to do like bird watching classes or anything like that is I get so sick using binoculars. I get like really, I'm very prone to motion sickness anyway. Like I can't play first person video games really. Like they make me very sick. And of course I get like car sick and boat sick and all those motion sickness things. But also trying to look through binoculars makes me really, really nauseous after just like a few times. And I've tried different techniques that are suggested, and it just, but this time I remembered, I thought I'm just going to try to take a Bonine, which is what we take in this house for motion sickness. If you get motion sickness, Bonine is the best thing. It doesn't make you sleepy. I know that Dramamine makes a non-drowsy one, but I don't believe it. Anyway, don't come at me, Dramamine. But it's so good. Now, we also use those C-bands, which are like an acupressure thing. And I know that sounds woo-woo, but it totally works. Trust me. But the Bonine works really well too. And it made me, I was able to like do the binoculars and not feel like I was going to retch in front of all of these strangers. So nice. So lovely. But it was also really interesting. Like I thought when I was like going to the bird ID hike, and it was fairly early. I think it started at 8. I didn't think long about it, but I think when I just like imagined what it was going to be like, that I just thought I would be like people my age probably and older, and it was a huge variety. It was a lot of young people, like a lot of young men, which I was very like, what is happening with this? And like they all have fancy like giant scopes for their cameras and stuff, and I was just like, okay. We're like bringing like the binoculars that my husband found on a street somewhere. They worked, it was fine. But I was so interested. I was like, again, the guy who was leading it was a young man, and then like all these other people were young people too, and I was just like, this is so fun. Look at you getting off the internets and being in the world. So exciting. It was also just very fun to like have like a group of, I really enjoy doing stuff with other adults that feels sort of childlike. This happened when I was taking my naturalist class, like my master naturalist classes or whatever. It's really fun to be with other adults, like doing a slightly physical thing. It's not like, I mean, you're just walking around, but I think that helps to kind of like get you into like a less academic feel to a class setting. academic's not the right word, but and then like to be looking for something that like we're looking for this little bird and you know you can hear it but you can't see it, and you're like trying to pay attention to all the other people because they might see it, and then when they do see it you get really excited for them and then you want to see it, and it's like this, it's such a unique experience to have with other adults that I'm just so glad it exists in the world. So if you can take a class, sometimes it's just like anything. Sometimes there are people that are like too cool for school. I don't understand that phenomenon, but whatever. And there were also some like little kids on the hike who were like not being drugged there by their parent, but actually drugged their parent there. And like that was stinking charming. I overheard one of the little boys be like, birds are my favorite animals. And I was just like, oh my gosh, yay. But anyway, it's just fun to, if you can have an experience like that. I think that happens lots with fiber events too. Like people are just excited to share this thing that they like with you, and like it's very it's not common to be with people who are excited about the same thing as you are, and so it kind of creates this like more effervescent interaction. So yay, it's always fun when those happen, so go birding. Yeah, the blackbirdian warbler. Oh, they also have a warbler class, the Cornell, because I think there's like 48, I think it said, varieties of warblers. I don't know, it's fun. Sorry, I'm trying to get to my like, what are we talking about? Birding weekend, shop update to that. Oh, and then before we get into the knitting, I just have one like shout out, I guess, ish kind of thing. I don't watch a ton of crafting podcasts because I mostly listen to audiobooks if I'm not watching like a television program or something. There's no specific reason. It's just kind of how it's shaken out for the last many years. But MJ the Third, who also has a podcast, if you've seen it, she's delightful. And she has started a new podcast called Sibling Energy. Only one episode, but highly enjoyable. It's a great two-person back. There's like good energies, good back and forth. It was fun. So if you are looking for something new and different, I highly recommend it. It was delightful. I mean, I'm an only child, and there was a lot of shade thrown at the only children. Maybe the onlys and the middles are going to get together, present united front, because clearly, so just, you know, trigger warning. Sorry, I shouldn't have used that phrase, but for this, because that's flippant, but just heads up, if you're sensitive about your birth order. So one of the things they're doing is looking at different patterns and naming them as oldest, middle, youngest, or only, or different like techniques and things like that. It's very enjoyable. So yay, called Sibling Energy. All right, and then let's get into the meat of it. Yeah. I'm sorry, Gus. I apologize. I'm gonna have to. I finished my little Henrietta, the little like chicken in a dress that I was working on, and then I gave it to my mom without taking a picture of it. So I did not make this stand up. I had talked about maybe trying to make it stand up, but then I just did not have like the crafting energy to make that happen. So I made it as suggested. So as suggested, it's sort of like a little pillow with, I'm sorry, it's taking me a moment because Gus is laying in the middle of everything because there's wool. Oh, goodness gracious, Gus, I know I brought it up here. Are you like literally just laying on top? Oh, it is fine. It's fine. So you just stuffed it. I did stuff it with walnut because or walnut shells because, well, I had some because I felt like I needed to make, what did I even buy those for? I think I was going to make pin cushions for like a group of people, and then like that fell through. So I just have had like, you know, like a couple pounds of walnut shells in my house for far too long. So I was excited. So the pattern actually suggested that you stuff it with sawdust. Well, I didn't have that. I was not going to make that happen. But the walnut shells, they worked really well. And then you just make like a little pocket on the back of it so you can put like scissors in it or whatever. So I did finish that, but I don't have it to show you. But I did do some more work on my Autumn Frockture by Plum Street Samplers. So there's the pattern. And I am not using any of the called for threads because I had this little box of Valdanis. I know we've talked about it, but some kids don't watch every episode, which is great. But I had this like little box of Valdani embroidery floss, and I thought, I think I can make that work. This is the Folk Art Fusion collection from Michelle May of the Raspberry Rabbits. And here is mine so far. Right? So the only thing I'm upset about with my version is I love this. I don't know if you can tell with this detail or not. There's sort of like this almost like checkerboard texture in the bird. And because my threads had more variegation than the called fors, and then also I had less contrast, it's less visible. But I know it's there, so it's fine. And again, I was trying to be economical and use this thing that I already had. But I'm very pleased with it. This fabric is a 35 count. I think it actually might be, no, it's not. I don't know what it is. 75. And I just sort of very briefly, a new project, and it's on 32s. It's on 32 count, and I'm like, oh, this is delicious. It's so much chunkier. But I still like the way it looks. But yeah, I'm working on my little pumpkin right now. So I am enjoying that so very much. And then knitting. So I have finished 2 things. I finished my shawl using my Spindle Spun Knit Spin Farm Bat Vents from 2023. Dun, 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 dun. Right. So this is sort of based on the Yowza Weigh It shawl number 2, I believe, which is like a 3-section shawl. So these are really nice if you do want a shawl to lay on your shoulders, like I would say like more of a traditional way of wearing a shawl. Because with it being the 3 pieces, it just sits very comfortably. It doesn't move around a lot. So if you want that more like traditional feel, it's a great shape for that because it really does stay in place. The only difference is instead of doing the border as suggested, I think hers is sort of like a ruffle. I decided to do just some like feather and fan because I really like doing feather and fan. And again, it's a very traditional look. Old shale. I believe those are the same thing. But yeah, so this is one strand. It's 2-ply yarn. Again, a spindle spun 1-ply from 24 mini bats. And then the other ply is a mohair silk. And it just depends on the bat coloring, what color mohair silk I used. But most of it is either white, or I had like some of this like sort of like minty seafoamy green, and I had some darker blue and some lavendery color. But so I'm very pleased with how it turned out. And it has got a lot, it's got a good size to it. So, you know, it's very easily can be thrown over and still feel like it's going to stay in place. And I love how lightweight it is. And I think because of the mohair and it being hand spun, because I tend to spin sort of like a woolen-ish draft. So usually my yarn is pretty light. It's a little bit less consistent than somebody who does a worsted draft. Like it's not as perfect looking. But one of the great things about it is it does hold a lot of air, which of course makes things warmer for their weight. So combine that with the mohair silk and you've got a really lightweight shawl that I'm thinking is going to be warm. And the other good thing is using a commercial mohair silk in this case for one of the plies is if you are newer to spinning woolen spun and you're concerned about your singles maybe not having enough twist or might be a little bit inconsistent, plying them with a commercial yarn kind of helps with both of those things. For example, look, a lot of times when people try to learn to spin woolen, when they're plying, their yarn will come apart more often because there is less twist in the single than you might be used to. And so it's really nice if you're plying with something that's grabby like a mohair silk and it's again going to be consistent throughout. It's a lot easier to just spit splice those broken singles together. Anyway, it's just a great technique. It's very enjoyable. Ta-da! So there's that. And then I also finished my sweater. Sorry, Gus. Gus is not pleased with this. Sorry, buddy. So sorry. So I finished my sweater that I am making, or that I made with the Barocco Mochi, which is one of those tube yarns. They're called something. Now I can't remember what it is. But it's basically sort of like a nylon, a tube, like an I-cord tube almost, with like fiber blown into it. So they create a pretty lightweight yarn for the circumference of the yarn. This I think is considered a worsted weight, and I doubled it. Crazy. But I will hopefully show you a picture of it on my body here. So here's my sweater on my body. I probably will not style it with my pajama pants and my Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling t-shirt, but you know, maybe I will. I don't know. It might go with my new fancy shag haircut. I'm just saying, okay? So yeah, I'm really pleased with it, how it turned out, right? It's got like that boxy feel. Again, it's cropped, which is definitely what I wanted. This is my bending waist. So it literally just comes, I don't know what things are anymore. This is my hip line. So it's cropped, but not like super cropped. It's a little bit below like the smallest circumference of my body. But yeah, I enjoy it. My raglan shaping is to do every other row decreases on the back, so bottom up. Every other row decreases on the back until it gets to the size I want. And then usually for like the first third to 1/2 of the depth of the yoke, I'm decreasing every row on the fronts and the sleeves. And then usually when I get to either 1/2 or 2/3 left of the yoke, I can go back, or I can go down to decreasing every other row. And that's just because proportionately for my height, like if I do a standard every other row decrease, my yoke will be super deep. So, right, like this is, you can see the armhole is pretty much exactly where I want it. If I did an every other row decrease, my armhole would probably be down here. So that's a really, I don't want to say it's a simple way to modify because it's always a challenge to modify a pattern. But it's an option for modifying patterns. If before, when you have made a raglan sweater, it's either been too deep in the arm side or it's been too big on the top to fit you in the bust. So one of the ways to deal with that is to put more stitches on the front of your sweater, right? So like I have fat tissue, I have breast tissue on the front of my body. So I put more stitches on the front of the sweater, and then I need to decrease them a little bit faster than is the standard rate of decrease. And that is how I get a sweater to fit me like I want. And this is because I've been knitting for 28 years, 27 years, I don't know. Trust me, I had many sweaters with armholes down here. Or conversely, like yoke sweaters that had armholes like up here. So like, you know, just trying to find that what works for you. But there are lots of people out there who do tutorials and things about, well, not tutorials, maybe it's not the right word, but there are people out there writing about how to modify sweaters. Amy Herzog, who I have always sort of referred to, but if you have another resource, I would love to hear about it, and I'm sure other folks would too. And I'm really pleased with it. I did not use a specific pattern. I did mine bottom up, raglan, with just this texture pattern, which is like a 4-row repeat. Excuse me. It's basically like 2 rows of garter and 2 rows of 1x1. So you just get one like the reverse stockinette ridge. And so it was just enough to kind of like keep me engaged and keep me interested. And I really liked the visual texture, especially this yarn kind of has, sheen is not the right word. It's like a matte sheen. I know that's not correct, but the light plays with it in an interesting way. It has some variegation in terms of like, you get like the darker black into like a more silvery color. But I think also the tube that the fiber is blown into is like that silverier color. So it creates a different interaction with the light. I don't know. But I'm really pleased with it, and I like how I really turned out the way that I visualized it turning out. Well, here's the buttons in case. They're just like a simple little, they are vintage, but they're not like fancy vintage. So they're just a simple little black button. But yeah, it turned out really the way I liked it. Oh, another thing I did is I added short rows just so, usually you want to add some short rows to the back of your sweater, but I was not in a, whatever, I was experimenting. Since I wasn't using a pattern per se. So I just actually added them to the collar because I didn't want to mess with like doing the stitch pattern. It's not like a big deal to do it, but I just wasn't there. You know, sometimes you're just not there. So I just did the collar, and I'm actually totally pleased with how it turned out. It worked out just wonderful. It just worked out fine. So yeah, I'm really pleased with it, especially like just winging it a little bit. Yay! I wanted like a sort of like bomber-ish shape, like a round boxy shape, like not fitted. I want it to be like bulky but in a round way, which I think it did. So I'm very pleased with it. Huzzah! I need a haircut, clearly. Yeesh. Oh my gosh, can I just discuss? I have been tempted by so many crazy haircuts. I don't know who I think I am. But I see all these like fun, super textural haircuts, and I am like, give me it. Like, I'm literally like, I definitely want a mullet. Who am I? I'm not getting that because that is just, I'm not saying I'm not getting it. I don't think I'm gonna get it. But like so interesting and like all the texture and they're fun. I don't know. I'm just having this like moment. I want to just be a little bit, I don't know. I just want to spice it up for some reason. So I've been very tempted by all of the like super shaggy. I have super fine hair. It does not texturize well. I don't know what I think is gonna happen. It always was just like this. But I had short hair in college, and I just put a lot of product in it and like fooshed it up. I don't know. Maybe it's gonna happen. I don't know. We'll see. Okay, so that, oh my gosh, is that all the knitting and stuff I have to talk about? It totally is. So now I'm gonna talk about books. If you're not interested, that's fine. We'll talk next time. The first one I'm going to talk about is Nick Offerman's Where the Deer and the Antelope Play, the pastoral observations of one ignorant American who loves to walk outside. I did listen to the audio version of this, which is narrated by Nick Offerman. I would read you the synopsis, but it's actually quite lengthy, and I don't know. It feels like a little highfalutin for what the book was. I say this actually because I did read it to you, but the camera wasn't recording. And as I was reading it, I was just like, this feels like it was not written by the author, which of course it wasn't. But this is enjoyable. I listened to it while I was working. If you enjoy Nick Offerman, I mean, I just enjoy his voice in general. And he's talking about nature stuff. Sign me up, I'm in. He takes a couple of trips. He does, okay. So he takes a backpacking trip into Glacier, or not backpacking, just a hiking trip into Glacier National Park. I'm in. He goes and spends some time with James Rebanks. Is that his name? Yes. The man who wrote Shepherd's Life and English Pastoral, as well as his partner and family. So again, sign me up. Shepherds, I'm in. And then he also takes or recounts a road trip with his wife Megan Mullally that they took during COVID to see family. He bought an Airstream trailer and they did a couple of different campgrounds and just their experiences doing that. So yeah, I enjoyed the book quite a lot. The only thing, again, my only complaints, that's a strong word. My only eyebrow raises, maybe that's a better word, are that like it's a really rich dude talking about stuff. It's like a rich white guy. And like that's just always gonna grate on my nerves the tiniest bit. I just have to acknowledge my biases. And like I'm just always gonna be a little bit ready to criticize, I guess. So that's really it. I mean, one of the things I did take away from the book that I really enjoyed is that he talks several times about looking for nuance. And like, that's not a complicated thing, right? But like, for example, when you're reacting to somebody's post on Instagram, rather than just having like that knee-jerk reaction of black or white thinking, is just to like always look for nuance. And no matter what it is, just always look for nuance. And that's not a complicated concept, but I liked that that is just a succinct way of saying that saying something that's sort of abstract, right? And that we all know we should be doing, but it's kind of like not necessarily our current system. It's not really set up for nuance, shall we say. So I did really, that's one of the things I took away that I really enjoyed, was just like that that succinct way of saying that thing that I know that I needed to be doing more. So I appreciated that. But for example, like, so one of the things that like, I agree with a lot of things he said. And it's not that I don't agree with this, but for example, he goes paddleboarding with a friend. And there are all of these like luxury yachts, right? And he has this like conflict where he's like, why would you spend all of this money on this yacht that's just gonna sit empty most of the year. And like, if you're on the yacht, you're really not even in nature, right? Like, you're being secluded essentially from nature by like all of this luxury. And I'm like, Mr. Offerman, you just spent like chapters of this book about you and your partner traveling in an Airstream. Now, I know an Airstream doesn't cost as much as a yacht, but for most working class people, they're kind of equivalent. Like, they're more than we can ever afford, right? Like, so I know that they're not the same amount of money, but like, they are equally unattainable to many, many, many folks. And it was just one of those moments where I was like, it's really hard to write a book when you're a really rich white dude, right? Like, it's hard. I have not written any books. He's doing way better than me. But so anyway, so just like little things like that, again, that don't pollute his message and that don't take away necessarily from the charm of the book, but are a little bit like, are you living in your Airstream trailer? No. Did that again. It's equivalently similar to a lot of people. And I know when they camp, they talk a lot about like hiking and being outside of it. But I'm just a little from this side of the fence. But I did enjoy it. So that's Where the Deer and the Antelope Play by Nick Offerman. Sorry. So the next book I'm going to talk about is A Living Remedy, a memoir by Nicole Chung, and this was read not by the author, but that's okay. Read by Jennifer Kim. So let me just read you the book description. So there's accolades. Okay. Today, from the best-selling author of All You Can Ever Know comes a searing memoir of family, class, and grief. A daughter's search to understand the lives her adoptive parents led, the life she forged as an adult, and the lives she's lost. In this country, unless you attain extraordinary wealth, you will likely be unable to help your loved ones in all the ways you'd hope. You will learn to live with the specific, hollow guilt of those who leave hardship behind, yet are unable to bring anyone else with them. Nicole Chung couldn't hightail it out of her overwhelmingly white Oregon hometown fast enough. As a scholarship student at a private university on the East Coast, no longer the only Korean she knew, she found community and a path to the life she'd long wanted. But the middle-class world she begins to raise a family in, where there are big homes, college funds, nice vacations, looks very different from the middle-class world she thought she grew up in, where paychecks have to stretch to the end of the week, health insurance is often lacking, and there are no safety nets. When her father dies at only 67, killed by diabetes and kidney disease, Nicole feels deep grief as well as rage, knowing that years of precarity and lack of access to health care contributed to his early death. And then the unthinkable happens. Less than a year later, her beloved mother is diagnosed with cancer, and the physical distance between them becomes insurmountable as COVID-19 descends upon the world. Exploring the enduring strength of family bonds in the face of hardship and tragedy, A Living Remedy examines what it takes to reconcile the distance between one life, one home, and another, and sheds needed light on some of the most persistent and grievous inequalities in American society. This was I really appreciated this memoir. I was going to say enjoyed, but that's really not the correct word. It was really heart-wrenching, and it appears to be pretty polarizing. Now, this is, I've not read her other book. Her other book, I think, from what I've read, focuses more on her experience as a Korean child growing up in a white household. I think she's just a smidge younger than I am, if I'm not mistaken. So this one really does focus on her relationship with her parents and sort of a little bit of their origin stories. It seemed, I read a couple of reviews of the book, and it seemed like people were pretty polarized on whether they really enjoyed it, it really spoke to them, or they really did not have any resonance with it. And that kind of surprised me, but it does make sense. I think a lot of the things that resonated with me about it are the discussions of class. And so I can imagine that if you've never experienced that, that could, or if you've never experienced a different class than you currently live in, that probably would not resonate with you, especially if you've not read a lot of, if you're not able to empathize with those positions. Like one of the, I know everybody can write a review, right? But one of the reviews I read was like, this is a really heartbreaking thing about her father and his inability to access healthcare, and like how hard he's worked through his life, and yet it just feels like he could never get these pieces to line up in a way that is good for him physically and mentally. And like one reviewer was like, it seems like her father chose not to access healthcare. And I was just like, wow, that feels like a really tone deaf response. Like a lot of people choose not to access health. And I'm like, okay, well, if that's what you think, like, let's think about maybe why people are not choosing to access healthcare. Like, ultimately, I guess you could say it was a choice. But, like, again, look for some nuance. But I did really enjoy it. It was pretty heartbreaking, but in a way that... And another complaint was that people felt like it didn't have like a big resolution, or like a big like, and this is how it relates to everyone kind of moment. But I wasn't looking for that to happen, so maybe I just didn't, I wasn't expecting it, so I didn't, like, that's not what I was looking for, so I wasn't let down that it wasn't there. I just thought it was a really beautifully written, very thought-provoking. She deals a lot with her own depression and like suicidal ideation in a like, and like a powerlessness that comes with all of these situations. She has the support of what seems like a great friend network and spouse and everything like that, but still has these challenges, and it was just, I also really enjoyed, the book doesn't focus on it, but her parents are a member of a Christian Orthodox, maybe that's not right. Maybe it's, she just says Orthodox church. They were standard Catholic. Is that the right word? They are what I would think of as like Catholic. And then at some point they joined this Orthodox church, and like I really, that again, the book does not center on it, but it talks about their relationship with the church and the relationship with the church community. And I thought she did a really beautiful job of writing about that, especially as a person who is not a part of that community. And so I thought that she handled that in a really delicate way. It's, it's easy when you are not a part of a church to, I think there's like some sort of this, there's often a tendency to be dismissive of people's beliefs or things. That's an over exaggeration, but I feel like that tendency is often somewhere hiding, right? Like it's something that you either have to acknowledge and overcome, or that it kind of just like lays in like an oily little slick underneath of sometimes your ideas about church and church communities. And I say this as a person who was raised in the church and whose father and grandfather were ministers in the church. So I do have experience with, I think, both being in the church and being not in the church. So I did really appreciate that, and I wanted to mention that as like another reason that the text resonated with me is that I thought she did a really good job of that, and like again had clearly just been very thoughtful and considerate considerate's not the right word, considered. I just appreciated how delicately she held those things, and how her tenderness for her parents and then that community interacted together in the narrative. A Living Remedy, a memoir by Nicole Chung. So the next book I'm going to talk about is Cultish, The Language of Fanaticism by Amanda Montell, and that is narrated by Anne Marie Gideon. And here is the synopsis. The author of the widely praised Word Slut analyzes the social science of cult influence, how cultish groups from Jonestown and Scientology to SoulCycle and social media gurus use language as the ultimate form of power. What makes cults so intriguing and frightening? What makes them powerful? The reason why so many of us binge Manson documentaries by the dozen and fall down rabbit holes researching suburban moms gone QAnon is because we're looking for a satisfying explanation for what causes people to join, and more importantly, stay in extreme groups. We secretly want to know could it happen to me? Amanda Montell's argument is that, on some level, it already has. Our culture tends to provide pretty flimsy answers to questions of cult influence, mostly having to do with vague talk of brainwashing. But the true answer has nothing to do with freaky mind control wizardry or Kool-Aid. And cultish, Montell argues that the key to manufacturing intense ideology, community, and us-them attitudes all comes down to language. In both positive ways and shadowy ones, cultish language is something we hear and are influenced by every single day. Through juicy storytelling and cutting original research, Montell exposes the verbal elements that make a wide spectrum of communities cultish, revealing how they affect followers of groups as notorious as Heaven's Gate, but also how they pervade our modern startups, Peloton leaderboards, and Instagram feeds. Incisive and darkly funny, this enrapturing take on the curious social science of power and belief will make you hear the fanatical language of cultish everywhere. So this is the first book by this author that I have read. I currently have in my queue her book, The Age of Magical Overthinking, which I am looking forward to. This book and like how it is advertised or what have you, feels like it is more, it's advertised as having a deeper linguistic push than I really felt like it did. She does talk about language, and she uses language sort of as like the framework to do storytelling about cults and things that are like a cult following, things like that. So she uses the language as framework, but I think it is like, if you're looking for like a linguistic approach to it, this is not. I think you could be very disappointed, or I think you'll be disappointed. That said, I still enjoyed the book. I thought that I enjoyed her writing style. I thought it was very palatable. I personally, what I liked about the book is not necessarily what I thought I was going to get from the book. I really liked the juxtaposition of cult and then the use of cult language or techniques, or that's not the right word, but we'll say language because that's essentially what that's the main thing that she's talking about in marketing. So you're on one hand, you're talking about Heaven's Gate, and on the other hand, you're talking about, for example, SoulCycle or Peloton, or, insert corporate for-profit entity here. And so I really enjoyed that. And I thought that thought that was well done. And I don't think I have read before a book that kind of paralleled the two. And so I liked that, and I enjoyed that, I think as a culture, we're pretty dismissive of people who are taken in by cults. I think that we're wondering what's wrong with the person versus what's wrong with people who are trying to influence them and corrupt them, take away their free will. But at the same time, when a corporation does that for profit, it's brilliant marketing, and their worth goes up and up and up. And I think that juxtaposition is an interesting thing that we do, at least in America. And so I liked that that parallel. I mean, I don't know that she's explicitly states that, but that's what I took away from it. And that's the thing that I'm kind of chewing on more because of the book. So yeah, that's Cultish by Amanda Montell. And then so the only fiction title that I will talk about here is The Writing Retreat, a novel by Julia Bartz. And I did listen to that one. I apologize, I did not write down the narrator. So here's the description. A book deal to die for. 5 attendees are selected for a month-long writing retreat at the remote estate of Rosavallo, the controversial high priestess of feminist horror. Alex, a struggling writer, is thrilled. Upon arrival, they discover they must complete an entire novel from scratch, and the best one will receive a 7-figure publishing deal. Alex's long extinguished dream now seems within reach. But then the women begin to die. Trapped, terrified, yet still desperately writing, it is clear there's more than a publishing deal at stake at Blackbriar Estate. Alex must confront her own demons and finish her novel to save herself. This unhinged, propulsive, claustrophobic, closed-door thriller will pull you in and spit you out. It's not that great. But I did enjoy it. Again, it's a thriller. It's, the characters they're not all my favorites by any stretch of the imagination. Is character development the primary thrust of the novel? No, it is plot driven. It's a thriller, but it was enjoyable. So that's The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz. If that's your jam, there's some sort of again, the person who's hosting the retreat is a gothic horror writer, feminist horror. What was it? Feminist horror? Yeah. The high priestess of feminist horror. So, it's probably going to give you a little. So that's The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz. And so then the last book I'll talk about is Rough Beauty, 40 Seasons of Mountain Living by Karen Ovanen, narrated by Jamie Matter. I really need to write more clearly. Here's the synopsis. In the best-selling tradition of Cheryl Strayed's Wild and Helen MacDonald's H is for Hot, Karen Ovanen, an award-winning poet, ventures into the wilderness to seek answers to life's big questions with candor and admirable courage. Determined to live an independent life on her own terms, Karen Ovanen flees to a primitive cabin in the Rockies to live in solitude as a writer and to embrace all the beauty and brutality nature has to offer. When a fire incinerates every word she has ever written and all of her possessions, except for her beloved dog Elvis, her truck, and a few signed artifacts, Karen embarks on a heroic journey to reconcile her desire to be alone with her need for community. In the evocative spirit of works by Annie Dillard, Gretel Ehrlich, and Terry Tempest Williams, Karen's beautiful, contemplative, breathtaking debut memoir honors the wilderness of the Rockies. Rough Beauty offers a glimpse into a life that's pared down to its essentials, open to unexpected, even profound change, and Karen's pursuit of solace and salvation through shedding trivial ties and living in close harmony with nature, along with her account of finding community and even love, is sure to resonate with all of us who long for meaning and deeper connection. An outstanding, beautiful story of resilience, Rough Beauty is a luminous, lyric exploration, a narrative that reads like a captivating novel, a voice not found often enough in literature, a woman who eschews the prescribed role outlined for her by her family and discovers her own path to embrace the unpredictability and grace of living intimately with the forces of nature. No notes. I really enjoyed this, but again, I'm sort of a sucker for any book, memoir, what have you, that involves a woman living by herself in the woods. That's just my flavor. I enjoy it. I will say that, okay, so I love to, I usually try to read reviews more so after I've finished a book than necessarily before I read it, just depending. But there were a lot of reviews of this one that were like, it's a dog book. And I guess if you weren't expecting a dog story, I wasn't expecting a dog story, but I love dogs. So I was very happy that there was like this beautiful dog character throughout the book. So I was pleasantly surprised about it, but I guess if you hate dogs, I'm teasing, but I guess maybe some people are just really not into that. So there was a reaction. I mean, I don't know who you are. There were also a lot of people who were like, this book is just like this introverted person and they're in the woods. And I'm like, yeah, that feels like that's kind of what it was. Like, right? Surprised. I mean, in the blip, they talk about her escaping. I don't really feel like it was that. Like, it wasn't like this quest book. And maybe that's part of the problem. Like, people were going in expecting it to be this woman's quest to like go off and like resolve something and then come back, and it's not that. It's more that it doesn't feel like it's a quest for her to be by herself. It just feels like she always knows that she is gonna be by herself, like that she is gonna want to live like in a sort of minimalist natural setting, that she is happy and content on her own. It doesn't because maybe that's part of the problem, like not the problem, but maybe that's what people were expecting and then didn't get, and that could have led to disappointment, I guess. But I enjoyed it quite a lot. I really liked her prose. No notes. I enjoyed it. If that's your flavor of things that you like, I recommend it. That's Rough Beauty by Karen Auvinen. It's Auvinen. So if you stuck around this long, thank you so much for watching the show. I don't say it enough because I'm Midwestern and 45 and whatever, a socialized weird. I'm an only child. Everything's forgiven, right? Just saying. I don't say it enough, but thank you so much to everybody who supports the show, whether that's through Patreon or through liking and subscribing or making a comment or supporting the shop. All of those things are really greatly appreciated. They're really greatly appreciated. I'm very thankful that my schedule is flexible enough that I can go on a birding walk at 8 a.m. on a Saturday, that I can decide that I need to explore Shaker history, that I need to learn more about birding and birding calls. I really appreciate that, and I am thankful for all of y'all, and the dialogue that sometimes we get to create. I wish we could do more of it, but you know, it is what it is, and I'm thankful for it. So I will talk to you next time. Bye.